Chapter 20, June 27th, 2033, Seattle, Washington, USA, 70th floor, Illini Building, negative 61 degrees Fahrenheit, 1235 hours. Gino had volunteered to watch the windows on the north side. He had tried to volunteer for lobby duty, but Larry was still hesitant about putting a weapon in his hands. His voice rang out across the entire office, excited. "Lights! Guys, fucking lights!" I had the day off for a change, sitting at the communal table for lunch. I bolted upright at his words. Several people were clearly still processing what Gino had said. I sprinted through the cube maze to my tent, which now hosted my cold gear in addition to Linda's. I dove in, almost literally. I grabbed my jacket and snow pants, hastily shrugging them on in the warm office. A moment later, I was sprinting to the gap left as a sort of airlock to the windows. I heard people running and panting as they hurried to ready themselves as well. The air was very chilly near the windows, though not as bad as the lobby. Gino stood, slack-jawed, looking down at the streets far below. In the old world, it wouldn't have been an unusual sight. Now, in the dead, cold dark, what I saw took the breath from my chest. My feet stuttered to a stop. I leaned one ungloved hand on the glass for support. 700 feet below, a snake made of light wound through debris and wrecked cars in the street. Dark figures lit with bright lights were clustered together in a convoy. Occasional flashes lit the buildings as their lights roved the glass canyons. Staccato bursts of light were seen from different points of the convoy. Even in my shock, I understood what I was seeing. I turned to look at Gino and I was roughly shoved. Jessie was next to me in her black jacket. She had a stern look on her face. Behind her, dozens of people were jostling for position. I moved farther down the gap aisle, gently guiding Gino as he gaped at the sight. Once we had gone to the end of the space, I turned to look out again. Even as I watched, a dark cloud seemed to zoom by the windows of our sanctuary, blurry and dark in the bare starlight. Multiple high-powered lights trained on the cloud as it moved toward the convoy. A moment later, with my hand still on the glass, I felt the window rattle. Tracers lit the air as the large-caliber rounds impacted the cloud. Sparks were thrown, bullets ricocheting off of the strange cloud. Far to the right of our office, a loud crack sounded. When I looked, I could see a spider web of fractured glass forming. One of the bullets had struck, leaving a shatter pattern nearly 2 feet wide. These were very high-power rounds. As we watched, the tracer rounds continued to pound the weird cloud. It juddered visibly, tatters of its smoky substance wisping away. Metal gleamed beneath, scarred and scored by the high-caliber bullets. Another moment passed, and a small explosion set the window shaking once again. The strange craft banked crazily, smashing into one of the buildings down the block. It burrowed deep, throwing glass and steel into the air above the street. Light from the vehicles below glittered off of the debris blasted clear of the building. I turned my flashlight on and urged the others to do the same. One light wasn't very strong, even in the all-consuming darkness. However, dozens of lights focused together on one subject becomes an absolute beacon. One powerful light on the lead vehicle down in the street flicked on and off in acknowledgement. I let loose a small cheer, amplified by 40 throats as we all watched in awe of the fight far below. Jessie shouted over the susurrus, stunning the crowd into silence. "That's the military, everybody! We need to pack up now! They'll be here shortly! Food and clothes first. Bring your backpacks and anything we have to spare. If we have room, think about books and games. We want to bring value with us." Larry's voice rumbled out immediately after. "All certified armed personnel to the lobby. On the ready, safety's on. Fire only if necessary." People filed out of the small window space, but I had no patience. We weren't returning to this safe haven. Our sanctuary had done its job, but that job was done. I stepped heavily on the sheeting in front of me. Gino boggled as I put my weight on the plastic. A moment later, the plastic gave out with a pop. I strode freely into the opened office. It took a moment longer, then it seemed everybody finally understood what I had come to know. We were done here. The military was coming to rescue us. I saw Linda rushing to our tent. "Lynn, can you pack my stuff?" She nodded vigorously, and I broke off for the storage room. We had burned through a good number of supplies in the 2 weeks, but there was still a fair amount left. I met with Jesse and Larry as they joined me in the storage room. "We need to leave the MREs behind. They're bulky. The military probably have plenty of food, especially stuff like MREs. We need to bring stuff that won't necessarily be at any base they bring us to." "They probably don't need plastic. What should we bring?" Jesse said. "Books, games, clothing, protein bars, whatever people can carry, and make sure they're all in the cold weather gear. We should have enough for everybody by now." Larry spoke up. "They likely won't allow any personal effects inside the vehicles. Too cramped." "Great. Anything that won't be immediately destroyed by the cold then," I answered him. Larry nodded. "Jesse, grab whatever we have left for protein bars. Larry, all of the medication. That will be helpful no matter what. I'll go get the watch organized. Give me all of the shotguns." We broke up and set about making sure each task was fulfilled. I called Brandon and Gino, as well as the rest of the certified watch, to the storage room. I met eyes with Gino as I explained what we were doing. I handed out a shotgun to each person, explaining that each was loaded with 5 shells in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. Each shotgun also had a tactical holster for ammunition on the barrel. I pulled Gino aside after each watch member had their shotgun. "Gino, I trust you, but whatever you've been infected by affects you in high-stress situations. We both know this. Your gun is not loaded, but I'm going to trust you. You have 5 shells in the tack rack. Don't load them unless you have to. Stay toward the back. Stay safe. Good?" He nodded, echoing. "Good." He broke off, heading with the group to the lobby. I saw him looking at the ammunition, but he didn't move to load it. I hoped he would be safe and not lose his mind when we needed him most. I checked with Larry and Jesse. Larry was packing one of the hiking backpacks with all of the medication. He was severely focused, excluding all else. Jesse was next to him, quietly discussing necessities. I left the storage room with my shotgun. It had a sling that I put over my head. I also had a pistol on a holster on my hip just in case. I quickly walked from Jesse's office to the airlock. Once through there, I was in the lobby. The fire doors were wedged open on both sides of the elevator lobby. Gunfire and shouting echoed up faintly from far below. I took up positions with my shotgun on the southeast door since it was the one we used most frequently. Shortly after I took up position on the door, Larry joined me. He stood on the opposite side of the frame, shotgun down but ready. An explosion rocked the building from somewhere below. A gust of wind rushed up from the stairwell a moment later. It had to have been an incredible explosion to have blasted air this high up. A shout rang from the main office. "They took another one down! One of those weird flying things!" I stayed at the ready on the door. Larry adjusted his stance. The lights of the office flickered in my peripheral vision. "Must have hit the building down below," I noted. My eyes never left the stairwell. Larry grunted. The gunfire grew in frequency and volume. It was clear the troops were approaching. I grew antsy, knowing our way out was down. However, we were trapped until contacted by the soldiers climbing to us. The wait was exhausting. It took nearly an hour for muzzle flares to be dimly visible in the darkness of the stairwell. I had a tack light on the barrel of my shotgun and turned it on for a moment. Once I had swept the upward and downward stairs, I stepped into the stairwell for a moment to look down through the central gap. It was only a few inches in between one side and the other, but I could see a dozen floors before the light couldn't penetrate any farther. I looked downward for a moment, then shut the light off. Gunshots echoed noisily up from below. In the renewed darkness, I could see the flashes of the guns as they fired. I quickly stepped back to the doorway. Larry was standing there, disapproval all over his face. 15 floors, I think. Should be here soon." 20 more minutes crawled by. Soon we could hear shouts as doors were kicked in and floors were cleared. Once they were about 3 floors below, I started shouting. Gino was on the opposite end of the lobby on the other staircase, but I could hear him echoing my words. "Friendlies on 70! Friendlies 70! Hold fire on 70!" I continued to shout, even though it took a solid 5 minutes for the first soldier to come into sight. I stood off to the side with my flashlight trained on the wall. Larry was also tucked back to prevent any friendly fire. "Put your weapons down!" shouted a man with a heavy New York accent. I held my shotgun out by the barrel and placed it on the ground, facing away from the soldier. I peeked around the corner, only barely managing to see a silhouette through the glare of his tack light. He slowly approached, and I stepped into view with my hands up. "Don't shoot! We're friendlies!" His rifle dipped, shining his light on the ground near us instead of in my face. I could finally get something of a clear view of the first new person we had seen in 14 days.